Well, good morning, everyone. I thank you all for joining us today. For folks I haven't met yet, I see there's quite a few people on here. I'm Sharice Davids. I represent Kansas's third district in Congress, and we're here to talk about what's going on this week. We're seeing President Trump and congressional Republicans once again putting forward a budget proposal that would be devastating for hardworking Kansans. This budget is extreme, it's short-sighted, and it puts the priorities of billionaires and big corporations ahead of everyday people. Kansans are already doing everything they can to stretch their paychecks. Parents are choosing between groceries and medication. Seniors are worried about affording care. Small business owners are just trying to keep the lights on. Folks are working hard and doing their part, and they deserve leaders out here in Congress who are doing the same thing. Instead, this budget tells them that you're on your own. This budget gives huge tax breaks to billionaires while raising costs and cutting services for everything else. And I'm going to tell you how. This extreme budget would gut Medicaid, putting the healthcare of so many people at risk. The healthcare for more than 13 million Americans, including 90,000 people across the state of Kansas. That's children, that's seniors, that's folks with disabilities who rely on Medicaid to afford their prescriptions for their doctor's visits and for long-term care. This would also force rural hospitals to close. This would leave entire communities without access to emergency care and devastate local economies that really need these hospitals for support. And it cuts access to reproductive care by forcing Planned Parenthood health centers to close across the entire country. States like Kansas, where abortion services are legal, would be hit the hardest because over 1 million people nationwide would or could lose access to things like cancer screenings, to birth control, STI testing, and other life-saving care. And it doesn't just stop at healthcare. The reckless proposal that we're seeing would also raise grocery prices by slashing emergency nutrition assistance, meaning that thousands of Kansas families could struggle to put food on the table. And there's even a specific provision in there that would take food away from veterans. And we're in this place where people are, I know I already said this, but people are really, really stretched thin right now. This bill threatens small grocery stores that are already operating on thin margins, especially in our rural and underserved areas. This is going to push us further into a hunger crisis. And because that apparently was not enough, this also guts the clean energy tax credits that I helped pass alongside many Republicans who have been supportive of those lately. These are incentives that do things like lower energy bills for families, support good paying manufacturing jobs, and help projects like the Panasonic plant right there in the third district move forward. All of this progress would be at risk. And despite all these harmful cuts, this budget still adds more than $3 trillion to the national debt. And it really is just to fund more tax breaks for the ultra wealthy. I am I am frustrated, but I can tell you I'm also fully committed to working with both parties to ensure that taxpayer dollars are used responsibly. And while we see President Trump and congressional Republicans talk about fiscal responsibility so often, this budget makes it clear where their true priorities are right now. This is not responsible. This is not a responsible budget to help make sure that that working families are taken care of. Instead, it is going to make sure that working families pay more and billionaires pay less. It's not responsible to slash investments in healthcare and nutrition and turn around and explode the deficit. Kansans, if they understand anything, it's the value of a dollar. And I know that the folks back home in Kansas expect the same level of discipline from their elected officials as they have to have at home. I was raised by a single mom who served in the Army, and I know what it looks like, what it feels like to live paycheck to paycheck and to worry whether or not you're going to have enough at the end of the month for groceries or rent or gas. And I also know that this budget that's being pushed by President Trump and congressional Republicans is not what responsible policymaking looks like. That is why I've offered a different path that we can move on. I recently joined some of my colleagues. I'm part of the New Democrat Coalition, and I've joined along with my New Dem colleagues to introduce common sense tax frameworks that we can work on that are actually going to lower costs for working families, that are going to support small businesses and grow the economy without exploding the deficit, because that is possible. Our plan looks to expand the child tax credit. It looks to incentivize caregiving and technical education and encourages domestic manufacturing. And we can do all of that while rejecting tax giveaways to billionaires. This is a framework that we have built on bipartisan proposals, because I can tell you that Kansans not only want but deserve real solutions, and not just these partisan gimmicks that we keep seeing out here. I am doing this. I'm in Congress. I am uh, representing the Kansas Third because I believe in the people of my state. I believe in the people of Kansas. I know that, Kansans have a lot of grit and a lot of resilience, and Kansans deserve a government that shows up for them. And that's what I'm going to keep doing. I'm going to keep showing up. I'm going to keep listening and working toward policies that are going to make life better for all Kansans. And I feel again a bit frustrated seeing this process play out, but I also know that there is a path forward, and I'm going to keep working on that. So thank you all for being here. And I'll turn it back over to Zach so we can get to the questions.
So much, Rep. Davids, and everyone knows we will be, if you didn't get to record this, we'll be posting this on our YouTube page a little later. But now, if you do have a question, please hit the raise hand button and then I can unmute you. All right. S. Jernander. I don't know if I'm
Yeah,
saying that right.
sure.
Great.
Yes, Sophia Jernander. Yep.
Thank
Um,
you.
I'm wondering if you could explain a little bit more about. I know that one of the provisions in the bill is that with the SNAP error rate margin, anyone sort of under 6% would sort of be taken care of, but Kansas has an error rate margin over 12%. So after this, what do you think happens to people in Kansas who are on SNAP? What are sort of the details of how that would work out for them?
Well, first of all, I big picture would say that these SNAP provisions and these attempts to cut nutrition assistance programs more broadly for folks across the entire country is unacceptable. It is actually going to hurt so many people who are already either living paycheck to paycheck or having to make those difficult decisions that I mentioned earlier, food or medicine. And this is going to lead to more people being hungry, and that is not just seniors; it's also kids, and eventually will lead to even higher grocery costs, and possibly more grocery stores having to close their doors. So, big picture, that's the overall consequence that we're talking about. And in a state like Kansas, where we have so many people who are making use of these nutrition assistance programs, looking at something like their error rate or the state the state's ability to fund these types of programs is, I would call this one of the creative ways that some of the more extreme Republicans in the Congress are really just trying to figure out how they can cut programs like nutrition assistance and give tax breaks to literally the absolute wealthiest people in our country. And frankly, it's unacceptable. I think that the other piece that is really concerning about the nutrition assistance program, whether we're talking about the error rates or other provisions that the congressional Republicans are trying to get through, is that this also has the huge potential of undermining our ability to get a bipartisan farm bill done. And at the end of the day, the bipartisan farm bill is must pass piece of legislation, not just for the nutrition assistance program pieces, but also because the so sorry, I've got the House floor on here, and it just came back on. Not just because of the impact it would have on the nutrition assistance programs, but because we need a coalition of people to come together to be able to pass a farm bill. And the longer that takes, the more devastating it is for our farmers who absolutely depend on the USDA programs.
All right. I think someone's in there muting her TV right now. But I'm going to go ahead and Zane, I think we're up.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, good morning, Representative. I'm Zane Irwin. I'm with KCUR in the Kansas News Service. I wanted to ask about this $50 billion in emergency funding for rural hospitals, supposed to help offset the impact of the diminished provider taxes. What do you make of that piece of this, in the Senate version? Do you think that's enough to make the difference?
The short answer is no. While I can tell you that I do appreciate the acknowledgement that um, any cuts to Medicaid are going to have a disproportionate, harsh impact on our rural hospitals. And, Kansas particularly is already dealing with access to care issues in our rural areas. It's one of the reasons that making sure we're improving and increasing access through telehealth has been so important in our state, and we've seen bipartisan support for that. But I will say that that's a Band-Aid for a problem that's being created by the consistent attempts to undercut Medicaid that we're seeing from the Republican leadership and from the president. And, I can tell you that I was encouraged to see that, our senior senator, Senator Moran, was vocal in his support for rural hospitals. But overall, this bill is going to be devastating for rural hospitals, and the rural hospital fund is not going to have the weight behind it to actually be able to help stave off these rural hospital closures that are going to come if Medicaid gets cut like this.
I think Zane, Lucy, go ahead. Lucy, do you want to unmute yourself?
Sorry about that. Do you see any major changes coming from the Senate version to the House version of this bill?
That's a really good question. I did just get back to DC, and I know that I can tell you, at least for the Democratic side, we have been introducing quite a few amendments to try to improve this bill, to try to stave off cuts to Medicaid, to try to push back and fight against the cuts to the nutrition assistance programs, and even amendments to try to ensure that some of the clean energy tax provisions are addressed, because every single one of those things, Medicaid, nutrition assistance, people's access to healthcare, all of those things are so important for our economies. And then the clean energy tax provisions are no different. We've got Panasonic about to open their doors and start sending electric vehicle batteries out across the country. And some of these provisions that would be helpful for a company like Panasonic and for others that are trying to increase their domestic manufacturing of these types of products If we don't push back and fight against those getting rid of those tax provisions, it would have a devastating impact on future domestic manufacturing capability that we're trying to build up here. So yeah, I would say that it's maybe too early in the day to know whether or not we're going to be able to see some changes in this bill, but I can tell you we're going to keep pushing for them.
All right. Anyone else have a question this morning? Okay, well, like I said, oh, Zane, you got one more. Go for it.
Sure, yeah. I mean, you said you're going to continue to propose amendments and fight for changes in this legislation. Who are the persuadables? I mean, whose office are you gonna knock on? Who are you gonna talk to see if you can get, kind of wear down that margin, see if you can get some changes to this bill that you said you'd like to see.
Yeah, well, certainly, when it comes to the negotiations of some of these provisions, I will say that the leadership on both sides of the aisle are engaged in much more hard-hitting negotiation. I can tell you on some of the tax credits, including the child tax credit. We're going to continue to make the case to some of the Republicans that we've worked with on those issues. I mean, I was also in contact with Senator Moran about some of the provisions that again, while I don't think that the Senate version of this bill is acceptable, I also do know that that there are some Republicans on the other side of the aisle who are at least open to continue the conversation. But yeah, but it is up in the air, and we'll see as we all go back down to the floor here in a bit and continue to try to have those conversations.
All right, any final questions this morning? All right, Rep. Davids, any final words you'd like to give?
Sometimes I wish I was more of I can tell you I'm glad I'm not speaking after Emmanuel Cleaver on this press conference today, because he is a much more eloquent and impassioned speaker than I am. But I can tell you that this reconciliation budget proposal that the Republicans have put forward is my heart is beating so fast right now because of how frustrated I am at the idea of giving billionaires tax breaks and making life easier for people who already have wealth than it is for people who are working really hard day in and day out to take care of their families. We get sent here to represent every single person in our district. And right now, this piece of legislation that the congressional Republicans have put forward is going to make life harder for working people. It will make life harder for young people. It will make life harder for our seniors and our veterans. And that is not why people sent us out here. They sent us out here to make sure that that we send the message that people who are in the federal government really do care about the well-being of our constituents. And whether it's on the Medicaid or nutrition assistance, I am going to keep fighting back against any of these cuts, because I want people in the Kansas Third to know that regardless of party, I am absolutely out here working for you. And I want to make sure that I'm doing everything I can so that you can thrive and raise your families and enjoy your life. So thank you all for being on here today, and we'll talk to you all soon.